Hi there, people who've just joined us. Lovely to see you. And you're very welcome to this Zoom webinar with Sue Palmer. This is one of the Care Visions family talks. And as always, these are recorded, so you may be listening to this after the event, but it's lovely to have some people actually joining us live as well. I'm Linda de Caestecker. I'm a public health doctor, and Sue and I have been getting to know each other just before this session, and I think we're very fortunate to have somebody with her research background and her knowledge and her views and perspective to talk to us today. So we've got the chat function as well. Please feel free to put a question or a comment or anything in the chat, and I'll keep an eye on that and feed some of that into Sue as we go along. So let's get started. Sue, lovely to have you here. And maybe just start by telling us a bit about yourself and your background, and then we'll go into some of your research.
Right. Well, I was a primary teacher. I trained as a teacher at Murray House in Edinburgh, and I was a primary teacher for not that many years, about 10, including time being a head teacher in a little country school. But my main professional life in education was as a literacy specialist, and I used to write books about literacy, and then I became the BBC's literacy consultant, and started writing for the Times Educational Supplement about it. And eventually, by the end of the 90s, I was working for the English. I was living in England at that time. I was working for the English government on something called the National Literacy Strategy, taking research-based ideas around the country. So that's how I eventually got into this business of childhood, because as I was traveling about towards the end of the 90s, everywhere all over the UK, I kept meeting teachers who were expressing concern about the children. It was only little niggly things. It wasn't anything huge. It was things like they don't seem to be able to focus their attention as well as they did. Or we've got more little low-level behavioural issues. Or they're not getting along as well in the playground. These were things I actually noted down, these phrases, and I started tallying the number of times I heard the same phrase all over the place. The final one was that with the younger kids, that language seems to be going down year on year. And I got so concerned about all this that I went back to the people in charge of the literacy strategy at the Department for Education and told them and said, I think somebody should be looking at it. And they just weren't remotely interested. I couldn't get anybody to listen. So eventually I thought, well, if nobody else is doing it, I'm going to try. So I started researching. I started getting in touch. It was started with speech and language therapists. They were wonderful. And they're occupational therapists. They knew all about children's lives, physical development. And that led me into talking to play specialists, and that was fascinating. And then nutritionists and people who did sleep. As I did the whole, anything I could think of that might affect children's development, I was going around asking. And it took, in fact, between me starting and the book eventually getting published, it was 8 years. Utterly fascinating to meet all these people. And by the end of it, I'd come to the conclusion that there wasn't just one thing going on here. It was loads and loads of different things that were to do with the fact that our culture was changing really rapidly. I was very interested at one point when I was looking into screen-based technology that somebody told me about Moore's Law. You heard of it?
No, I haven't.
It's a guy called Gordon Moore, who was one of the founders of Intel, who were developing first microprocessors. And in the 1960s, he said, as soon as we get a certain size of microprocessor, it's going to go on an exponential curve because you're going to get a doubling and roughly every 18 months to 2 years of change. And that clicked in, they say. around about 68.
Gosh.
So that's, yeah. So it's the speed has just gone.
Yeah. So that interaction with teachers and then with all the other professionals led you to write your book that made
hang on,
us
I've
want
got
to
it.
talk to you.
I can hold one up.
Yes, Toxic Childhood.
Toxic Childhood. It came out originally in 2006, and then I got asked to do a revised edition in 2015 because things had changed a lot since then. It's actually quite interesting looking at the 2015 one. It's not that different. Same issues, but I mean, it's just that social media has increased so much.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, I did a couple of other books after that one on boys and one on girls. And I think all the things that adolescence film that we saw recently was featuring, I could see that starting when I was doing those books. Yeah. So, and
we have talked about that in some of the previous ones about the manosphere and misogyny, etc. You talk about junk culture in the book. What do you mean by that then? You said it's
it's because we got the term junk food, and the nutritionist I talked to said, we've been screaming about this since the 1970s. Nobody listens.
Yeah.
So it was. I then started thinking, well, there's also junk play.
Yeah.
I mean, when the definition of play is that it's intrinsically motivated, that it's active, that it's coming from the child. This is actually a biological drive, and it's the biological drive to learn and to find out about the world you're in and to discover how it works and to find your place in it and do things. So hugely important thing, which for millennia has been outdoors, active, and social. The kids with each other, just getting on with it. Hugely significant to our development as a species, and then every single individual. But it was being turned into stuff that you bought in the shops, and then stuff that you got on a screen, and then stuff, and it was all to do with, again, I felt as though I had my perfect storm that happened in the 80s. And on one side, it was this incredible speed of change driven by technology.
Yeah.
On the second side, it was the sort of triumph of global consumerism as the driving force of the planet. And at the bottom, it was the changing role of women. Because it was really the 80s that large numbers of non-working class women were moving out of the home and into the workforce. I mean, I think working class women have always worked, but there's always been an extended family or community that cared for the children. But once the women en masse were no longer at home, an awful lot of the wisdom that women had that was sort of shared, but nobody actually valued it, because it was just what women did with children. That got lost. And I've got this, my respect for my granny was always huge, but it's grown and grown because she knew almost everything. I found out when I was researching the book.
Yeah. Can we talk a bit more about play then? Because in your book and what you've been saying to me, play is such an important thing, and we've maybe lost some of that. So why is play so important, and how do we reverse some of these trends, do you think?
Well, I don't see how we can reverse much of it. And that's why, as I was traveling around talking to parents about it, I got so upset for the parents, because I felt huge burdens being put on parents and carers.
Yeah.
That it was a massive cultural change, and yet nobody was helping. Nobody was saying, well, this has changed, we're going to, which is why I think now we need to be in fact, it was what I recommended in my book. We need to be looking at our universal state services, particularly in terms of public health and education, and looking at different ways, perhaps, of organizing it, different ways of doing it. Because, the parents were saying, I can't let them go out to play. I mean, there's all these cars. And I don't know the local community like my parents used to know the people in the street. We don't know anybody. And when kids do go out to play, you get complaints from the neighbours.
Yeah, no ball games. Yeah.
I mean, I felt so sorry for them. And so I think we need to be looking really seriously at the way we organise, particularly early years care and education, because wonderful book called The Nurture Assumption by an American lady called Judith Rich Harris. I would love to have interviewed her, but I read her book. And she made the point, and I think it's a really good one, that up to the age of about 2.5 to 3, throughout history, in every culture, the vast majority of children would be looked after by their mom or by some close female relative. But at the age of about 2.5, 3, given that there was no contraception, one would probably have another baby. So the first baby, the old baby, would have to be looked after by somebody else. And that would probably be the other kids. They'd be left with the older children to look after. At the other end of the 3 to 7, 8 age range, which is one I think is critical for learning, the 7 or 8-year-olds would probably be perfectly capable of helping with the family business, whatever it was, looking after the beasts or helping with the cooking or bringing the water or something like that. So it's that 3 to 7 age group. They would have been socialized by each other. And it's really sort of significant. The big kids would have looked after the little kids. So the development of empathy and care in both genders, boys and girls. And the little kids would look up to the big kids and be helped by them, and also sometimes told off by them and all the rest of it. But it wasn't like being told off by young mum.
Yeah.
So I think that that group together, and it's why I eventually, the end product of writing the books was I helped to found an organisation called Upstart Scotland, which would like to have a kindergarten stage for 3 to 7-year-olds, which is qualitatively and ethically different from school. Very like what I've seen in Finland and Denmark. And actually northern Germany, and some places still have the old Rebellion kindergarten movement. So I think we need to support parents by making sure that the chance for play, outdoors, active, social, is in every child's life from at least the age 3. There needs to be extra help for those parents and carers who can't get them out before that. But it's the once they're up and mobile and about 2.5, 3. I don't know about you, Linda, when you got thrown out to play outdoors with the other kids, but I think I was 2.5.
Yeah, but it was different, wasn't it? In that we would be out playing in the street, and there were people nearby, and nobody worried so much about our safety, and we'd go into other people's houses. But given that there is more concern about just saying to your child at a young age, you can go out and play without me coming with you as a parent, what can parents today do about that? Because they may then just have to rely on screen time or TV or not being able to be out there interacting with their friends.
Well, oh dear, she'll tell me off for saying this, but I have a daughter who actually did because she trained as a nursery nurse, and then she works in looks after autistic kids these days. But she's always got what I was on about. So when she first got pregnant, she started. She knew that I went on about this. It takes a village to raise a child, so she started building her own village, and I think that's the only thing she can do. Is build your village of friends, local people, getting to know people. You've got to put yourself through it. And then the sharing responsibility and making sure that you or somebody gets outdoors with some of the kids as often as possible, and colonizing local spaces that you can do it in. I mean, one's blessed if one's got a garden, but if not, some sort of local wild space. And increasingly, you're getting these wonderful outdoor kindergartens and that. We've got now 50 outdoor nurseries, all day outdoor nurseries in Scotland. This is better than anybody else in the UK. Scotland is leading the way. So finding people that, like-minded people can help you do that. I mean, they obviously, you can't take them out as much as you would, but up to the age of 3, probably they mostly were with adults anyway in the past. So I'm looking at this in terms of evolutionary biology. Once you get to 3, then we've got to make the state do it and provide that environment for children that's all day. And in places, I mean, when I go to Finland, I'm just stunned by the support that they give to parents. It's a wonderful, wonderful system. And, the kids, the kindergartens, there's one in every community. So everybody knows it. And it's a source of advice and understanding about child development as well.
One of the charities in Glasgow that supports young people, they use that phrase, it takes a village to raise a child, but then they say, and the village also needs support. So I thought that was really good that there isn't always that village to support the development of a child. And we need to, as a state and as third sector organisations, help to support that itself too.
And to support the little networks that people can build up for themselves. And I think there used to be play groups and things that I was able to use where I met other mums. Far fewer of such things now because it's sort of everything's being... It's more difficult for people just to set something like that because of all the risk aversion and the bureaucracy that surrounds everything. And again, we are terribly keen on data these days and things like that, and it's difficult to get things set up. But and
we hear a lot. It's something you said to me earlier really struck a chord. We hear a lot about the attainment gap, and that's not narrowing, and that's disappointing. And I think you said it's not just an attainment gap; it's a development gap. Can you say a bit more about that?
I mean, it is attainment is based on development. When the Scottish government discovered its so-called attainment gap, it was a research study by Sossu and Ellis in, I think, 2014, and they identified a difference between children from high-income households and low-income households of around about a year to 18 months in spoken language and problem-solving skills. Now, spoken language and problem-solving are both developmental. You don't need to teach them. If children get the right sorts of experiences, they happen. They just develop. So this was a developmental gap. And if they'd had half a brain, they would have therefore supported children's development. But 5-year-old children in Scotland are in school. So they became education's possession. And education is about literacy and numeracy. So what we did, and my organisation, Upstart Scotland, got terribly upset by all this and campaigned bitterly about it. What Scotland did was introduce national standardised tests of literacy and numeracy for 5-year-olds. And that has meant that ever since then, and to some extent before, because it was already moving in that direction, there's an awful lot more pushing kids to get on with those skills at a very early age, which is possibly the very worst possible thing you can do. But it meant that it was always called an attainment gap. It's never been basically an attainment gap route. It was a developmental gap. And in the UN would recognise that, because the UN defines early childhood as birth to 8. And says that it's a time when the emphasis should be on holistic development, physical, social, emotional, and cognitive, in order to build a broad and solid foundation for lifelong learning and well-being. That's what we should be doing during that critical period, which is why, parents get blamed for things and children get blamed for things. And the state really needs to get its act together and realize the part it should be playing in this.
Yeah. So what would Upstart want to happen? Tell us a bit more about what you're campaigning for.
Well, the idea would be to have, well, first of all, drop those damn tests. That's our first priority. We have a very good early years curriculum document in Scotland, which is really excellent, called Realising the Ambition. And it actually goes to the end of P1. I'd like to see that extended to the end of P2. Right. Because if we just followed that, which is developmentally appropriate, it doesn't mention the word love often enough, but it does mention the word play. My two ingredients for a healthy childhood are love and play. I mean, it's not hard. That's what they always got the lucky ones. But it's really good on play-based, and it's also good on getting them outdoors. So if we could use that as our curriculum, and just help people to understand that the most important thing up to the age of about 7 or so is development overall. I can tell you uncontrovertibly, as a literacy specialist, you do not have to start learning to read and write at any particular age. It is a cultural acquisition, but it is based on the things we develop as human beings. So 7 is fine. And you find in Switzerland and Finland and Estonia and places where they don't make a fuss about it till 7, the kids learn in no time.
Yeah.
Because they're ready to do it, and they've already, most of them already got started under their own steam, and been supported at their own level. That's fine. So some kids are already reading fluently, but usually you just can rush through it, the basics, and make sure they can all do handwriting. Yeah. But the critical thing of getting them so that they've got the capacity to focus their attention, the capacity to regulate their own behaviour, that their social skills are well developed, because the big kids in the kindergarten have helped them. And perhaps above all in the current climate, resilience, emotional resilience is well developed. I mean, all these things, we just don't realise that our bodies and brains are equipped to develop them as long as we get the right experiences.
The right experience, yes. And I guess for children who find it harder to learn to read at 5, if it's a bit later when they're more developed, they won't feel like
they're fine.
A failure.
Yeah. And actually, it happened. I got an interesting opportunity to see this demonstrated that there's no problem when you're 7, because my granddaughter was at the Gaelic school in Edinburgh. So it was Gaelic immersion, so she'd been speaking Gaelic and all the rest of it, and they don't start reading until they're into primary 2. And it just so happened, she didn't take to it very well in primary 2, but it just so happened they moved house, and she moved into an English-speaking school at the beginning of primary 3. And Mum was dead worried, because not only, did she does not learn to read and write, but we got this book that I remember from using when I did special needs called Pawn It. And her mum did, I think it was about 8 weeks, and my granddaughter was reading and writing no problem.
Yeah.
So unless there is some real sort of genetic or real, and I have taught dyslexic kids, and I know that there are real problems that
sure.
Unless there's a real issue, most kids should be fine. The same with maths. These things are cultural acquisitions. It's not that you've got to do them. The only reason we say we have to do them at the age of 4 or 5 was when Victorian politicians in Westminster decided we should start school in the UK. It wasn't the time that most people decided to start school. It was only 12% of countries in the world start at that age, and all but one of them's part of the British Empire.
And we hear more now about parents saying, I'm not going to send my child who's just turned 5 or about to turn 5. I'll keep them back for the next year. Do you have any advice if people are thinking about that?
Well, I would say definitely do it. I mean, as long as you're happy with your nursery and, it's like my granddaughter is just about to turn 4, and her mum's going to have, and we now have funded deferral, so you get the funding to do it. So but it what we really need to do is not just tinker like that, because there's lots of parents who don't know that they can defer. We should be making sure that we're making the best possible provision for every single child so that they're getting the option. And we should also be really pushing the schools. When you get the kindergartens, some of them will be in schools, you push them to have outdoor access at all times.
Yeah. And you talked a minute ago about love and play, and they're the essential elements. And that's, you also in your book talk about attachment science. Can you say a bit more about that and how we ensure that where possible as parents we're giving children what they need?
Well, I just the thing that made me understand it was the work of John Bowlby, who was the great attachment scientist that it all started with in the 1940s. And his idea of something called you know that children need to be looked after. It's obvious, because you've got to look after them when they're very little. But the thing that made me go, oh, was this idea of an internal working model, which is your internal working model of the social world and how you fit into it, which Bowlby said is affected by whether or not you feel loved. When you know someone loves you, then you feel lovable. And if you feel lovable, then that's going to affect the way you think the world will relate to you. It's going to have an effect on your self-confidence, your inner feelings of, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Now I thought, gosh, I get that. Yeah, because my granny loved me very much. And there's a lovely line from, what's his name? Bronson Brenner, the other big developmental psychologist that looked at the holistic elements of development. And his final line was, someone's got to be crazy about that kid. That's first, last, and always. And it's just feeling, your love for just being you, not for something you can do. And so why am I busy on love here? That's.
Well, we were just talking about love and play and attachment. And I was thinking, for many of our foster carers, the children they're looking after won't have experienced that love as keenly when they were younger. So it's more of a challenge for the foster carers to say, well, you are loved now. We love you, and we care for you. But how do they overcome?
I have no idea how they do it, but I have talked to foster carers very often in the past, and I just think they're wonderful, because although I suppose in a way, when I was teaching, I taught sort of 7 or 8 year olds. Those are my favourite age group. And I loved every damn one of them, even Dylan. Because when they're yours and you're looking after them and you want them to succeed, you feel lust for them. So I suppose it's just something that if you're a foster carer, you can do it. But I think it's just the feeling that a child gets when they feel loved. And they'll know, because you want to spend time with them. You're interested in what they've got to say. You take their opinion into account, that sort of thing. But at the same time, you're also the grown-up, so they feel safe with you, because that you're the grown-up. And when you say you don't do that, that's not a good idea, they know it's because you love them.
Yeah. And what we've talked about in some of these previous sessions is screen time, social media, a number of the risks attached to that, and parents' dilemma of, well, how do you limit that, and what should be your approach or your rules around that? Is there as you say, we're not going to turn the clock back, and that these will be important for young people's learning. But what advice would you give to parents or carers around that?
It's really hard, but I think the first one is the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendations. I wish Britain had proper recommendations. We don't.
We don't have any.
Yeah, but the AAPs, they say that up to the age of 2, as little as possible. I mean, they used to say not at all, but then we got COVID and they realised that parents, grannies and people wanted to talk to them through FaceTime and things.
Yeah.
But as little as possible, which is really difficult when you've got one little one under 2 and then another older kid that's got this. So it's just really trying to keep it down, keep it real and as far as possible, and then try to limit it as they get older. Don't give them a phone until you absolutely have to. I think there's going to be a bit more attention to that in the coming years. I think parents and carers are going to get more support from the powers that be, because we are recognising now that it's not been a good idea for little kids to have phones. And I was apparently really, do you know this? If you're in public health, we've got what they call Common Sense Media does recommendations. Do you know them?
Well, you had mentioned them, so I looked them up, and I think it's very helpfful.
Yeah, I was doing a talk with a lady that was from Common Sense Media, and I'm thinking, my daughter got the information straight away, and I'm just passing it on because it's got bits in it for parents, and it's also doing recommendations to government. So that there are people out there that are thinking about it.
Yeah.
But I think that from then on, it's also really important to do something about one's own screen use. So I don't know, I think more and more people are doing this sort of thing. One guy that I met, he was an IT lecturer, and he said they've got a technology basket in the hall, and at meal times and all family times, everybody sticks all their devices in the technology basket.
Yeah.
And similarly, children have to put theirs into a locked cupboard at bedtime.
Yeah.
So they can't creep down in the middle of the night. Don't have any of these things in the bedroom because of the blue light and all the rest of it. So I think it's all of us have got to be disciplined about it. So it's a technology basket in the hall or something.
And as parents or grandparents, as we are, or carers, it's also staying up to date and knowing what's out there, because you need to know what the risks are for your children.
Utterly horrified by what this lady from Common Sense Media was saying about what was it? Social media, AI chatbots.
Yeah.
That you can get on your social media apparently with no trouble whatsoever, and the AI chatbot is if you're feeling miserable, it's there to support you. So it just supports what you say, but it doesn't say, I think you should go and talk to your mum.
Yeah.
Or why don't you ring Childline?
Yeah.
Or go and talk to your carer or someone. It doesn't say that. It just keeps saying, that's awful for you.
Yeah.
And it's making them worse, if they are a bit depressed. Yeah. So they're trying to get something done about that. But I didn't know about the AI chatbots.
When you talked about it, I thought, well, I can imagine children or young people may use that as somebody to talk to about mental health problems or anything in their life. But it, as you say, it'll just say that, poor you, I wish that wasn't happening to you. And it won't advise them to go and seek other help, which is often what's required. And we hear a lot about young people's mental health being poorer now since pandemic, but also with all the risks inherent in modern life that you've talked about. Have you seen that? Do you think that's the case, that our young people's mental health is more vulnerable?
Well, back in 2006, when the book was published originally, one of the guys that was advising me on something, Richard Harris, said, we should do a press letter about this. You've got all these contacts. So 112 people who had expertise in kids or on one area or another signed this press letter saying that, we really needed to act as at the society, because the incidence of childhood depression was suddenly starting to be noticeable.
Yeah.
And we were seeing more and more developmental issues. We thought, for physical, but particularly mental health, this was vital, right? So we did get the letter published eventually. The Times refused it, but we got it published eventually. And there was a bit of a sort of interest, but no, everybody said, no, the children are fine. They've never been so healthy. This is what the government particularly was saying. I mean, and they've never had so many wonderful things, and there's so many advantages to IT. So no, they'll be fine. And I just watched, like, flipping the Moore's law, the mental health figures for children. I mean, by 2010, this was getting really worrying, and it's just gone steadily. I think obviously there was going to be an even worse spike because of COVID, but that was well on its. I mean, and it's scandalous that we've allowed it to happen. So this is why, the trouble is, when politicians are looking for solutions to things, they want a quick one, don't they?
Yeah.
They want a quick fix. And what we're suggesting, which is, really try to make sure that our kids are as healthy and as well provided for as possible from the earliest stages. That's not a quick fix. Yeah. But it's going to have to be what they do. I mean, this is why Sarah Mill will get a kindergarten stage eventually, because eventually you have to. You're going to have to do something. But it's just so dreadful that so many children have had to go through miserable and very often dreadful times in order to get there.
Do you feel that politicians then are starting to listen, because they have to acknowledge that mental health is getting worse for our young people, and that there's evidence around early years development, early education? Are people taking that on board?
I think there's a bit more joining up of the dots going on than there has been in the past. We've got quite a bit of support in Parliament in all of the parties, but indeed the SNP conference, that's the members, not the politicians, and the Greens and the Lib Dems have it as policy to have a kindergarten stage now.
All right.
They've all passed it at their conferences. So, there's it's growing, but it's still, I mean, as someone whose professional life was in education, I am ashamed of the education establishment. I think what they're doing to our kids now is just so pathetic. The quest for data on what they want is constant improvement in results and things. Every day you've got to, it's every year it's got to, the kid's got to make this amount of progress. It's just reducing education to a sort of tick list. Teach them things, and I think primary's still not too bad in Scotland, but it's as secondary, it's like in England now. It's just passing exams. Yeah. It's not just the mental health problems and all the rest of it. You're also getting the kids kicking back and behavioural problems resulting, and an enormous amount of absenteeism for children who just don't want to go to school. Yeah. And it's just not responding to this. There have been so many reviews and reports, but I don't know whether it's the education department and the education establishment or the politicians that they want to shift. Just doesn't change.
And would some of it be that as more parents or more families have both parents working or single parents that have to work, that when the child goes to school, it does reduce many of the childcare costs?
Well, yes, obviously, and it always has. But we want to make sure that what's happening to them when they are in the service, the educational service or care services, is the best it possibly can be. And frankly, I think education, certainly in terms of what they're doing in their years with pushing the children and not prioritising development. And then in secondary school, where it's all very well if you're the sort of kid that passes exams, but if you're not, it's pretty dire.
Yeah.
And then you get a few behavioural issues, which probably have their origins in years. You get even a few in a class, and it's very difficult for the teacher to teach the rest of the kids. So it's making it more and more difficult every year. They really should be looking at the revision of the way the things been run. Because I go to Europe. I don't anymore, but I used to go and visit Europe quite a bit when I was on the road doing talks. And almost every other country, I would say, the kids in secondary are a lot happier than they are here.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you talked about, when you were researching your book, the different people you talked to, and you mentioned nutritionists, and that's something obviously is very dear to my heart as a public health doctor. And we fought hard to get healthy nutrition in schools, but what role is nutrition playing in some of this, do you think?
Oh God, dreadful. I mean, Alex Richardson, I don't know whether you come across her. She runs something called FAB Research, Food and Behaviour Research.
All right. No.
Excellent organisation. Right. She's brilliant. She's got me on fish oil. I've been taking fish oil to be a fish oil lady. But she was the one who got trans fats. She and her group got trans fats taken out of the diet. But I mean, we've just got so much rubbish being pumped into children through the food industry. And oh gosh, I won't be able to find it. But it's people. It's all short-termism, and it's all resist. Let's pay for as little as possible, just get through. So it affects school dinners and all sorts. But there was one of the, there you go. A lady called Agnes Nairn, who's a professor of marketing, and a good professor of marketing, not one of the ones who wants to poison children. She says that we should have a massive publicity campaign and require the marketing industry to fund it. She says, but even then, why should we have to wait for parents to complain before action is taken? We don't wait for complaints about criminal acts. There are policemen out on the street making sure they don't happen. As long as the industry is responsible for regulating itself, enormous corporations will go on manipulating children and their parents. It's simply not fair. And she gives her example it's a tech company, but it could just as easily be the food industry. It would take the average family about 1,800 years to earn what Apple spends in advertising in 1 year.
Yeah.
So you're fighting an impossible. But I think that idea of the marketing industry should be required to fund public health.
Well, yes.
Wouldn't that be good? And maybe it would stop them putting awful stuff down children's gullets.
I know we've got Claudia online, who's a nutritionist that works with Care Vision, so she may have a comment or question to put in the chat about that, because I think it's such an important issue that we're not really addressing. And I mean, it used to be that we had junk food companies actually sponsoring the work in schools, which, there's Claudia saying hi. And that just was shocking. But just to get back to what parents can do, we're kind of coming to the end of our time. So please, if there's comments or questions, put them in the chat, and this is your chance to ask Sue anything or clarify anything. But well, we're talking here about the big picture and what Scotland and the UK needs to do for a better start for our children. And you're working on that with Upstart Scotland, and your research and your books are supporting that. But just thinking more about what parents themselves can be doing, what would be your top tips that you would say to parents, given they live in this modern age?
Well, I did it. I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to write a parenting book. I wanted to write a sociological tract. But my agent made me put at the end of every chapter, here are some hints and tips that I got from the experts. So if anybody wants to find one, probably get them secondhand really cheap nowadays. But I don't know. I think that your tips like build your own village. I thought that was a great one. That when that came up, there was a nutritionist who said, I go on 80-20 with my own kids. I always reckon if I'm getting 80% of decent food down, then 20% rubbish probably won't do much damage. And I think the 80-20 rule is quite a useful one. I think the technology basket is a very good one. It's just all sorts of sensible things. But I think the other thing that really is important is recognizing how incredibly important what you're doing is. And valuing it yourself and recognizing that it's not just, it must, I realize that with the kids indoors all the time, as they practically are nowadays, it's not like when I was even bringing up my daughter in the 80s, because I could just let her go out to play for quite a lot of the time. We were in a place where she could. And I got time to myself. I feel for parents dreadfully and carers now because they're really so overburdened. But, it's a really important job, and just love them and let them play as much as possible.
And you'll make mistakes. I'm sure you made mistakes. I certainly did. But if your children know they're loved, that does overcome a lot of the mistakes you'll make, doesn't it?
It does. And I think also, as a grandmother now, who, when my grandchildren have left, looks at the catastrophic state of my house and gets all upset. I think the thing is not to worry too much about that sort of thing.
No. I know. I find that as well. When you're used to it being all nice and ordered, they come in. But just
it doesn't matter really. It's much more important that you love them.
So we're coming to the end of our time. Is there anything that you hoped you would get to say or talk about that you haven't managed to?
You've been ever so good. You've let me rant home.
You haven't been ranting. You've been very engaging. I've loved listening to you.
It's not our fault. That's all.
That's true.
It just happened. And we should be trying to vote in people. I think you have got to engage. And I wish parents and people would engage more with sort of political system, because you've got to. And actually, can I just say that business of being able to defer children's start at school, that was two lasses who were members of Upstart, and their children, they wanted deferred, and they couldn't afford to fund it. And they started a campaign called Give Them Time. And within about 3 or 4 years, they had got it. They lobbied politicians, and they changed the law. So, it can be done. It was something that they, could be done relatively easily by the politicians. So, engage with it if there's something, and, talk to other people about it. Don't just feel powerless.
Okay. Well, I'm going to finish up now, but just to say we've got another of the family talks in November. We do them once a month. And we've got another one in November, 20th of November, when we've got Gail Cochrane coming to talk about research that she's done around pornography and sexual health and young people, which is an issue we've touched on a bit in some of the previous talks, but it'd be really good to hear what she's got to say from the research that she's done with young people themselves. So unless there's any last questions, which I don't see in the chat, you must have just explained everything that people needed to hear. Sue, I'll say goodbye now, but it's been lovely that you've all joined us, and hopefully there'll be more joining the recording. And just to say thank you to you, Sue, for being such an easy person chatting, and with all your expertise from your research and your book. It's been really lovely to hear what you've got to say, and all the best with Upstart. And it's good that we know what that's about. So thank you.
Thank you.